Hi everyone. Today, Peter and I thought we'd do something a little bit different. We wanted to record a video kind of wrapping up all the key events from a market, a business and a legal perspective that took place in March 2021. And as a kind of one-off, we're going to share this through all of our social channels. It's going to be totally open to loads of people. And what we do, this is to give you a flavor of what we do on a monthly basis. So at the end of every month, we look to do a similar wrap up like this, but we do it as a live webinar. And then the recordings of those webinars will be available via our platforms. But for this one, enjoy and look out for details for the one coming up towards the end of April. Now with that, I'll pass you over to the guru of current affairs, Peter Watson himself from Watson's Daily. And yeah, he's the master. So over to you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Jake. A very lovely introduction there. I thought you were talking about something out of someone else there. Anyway, right. Thank you very much, everyone. Really nice to see you. And this, what we're going to do, as Jake says, is we're going to whip through, some of the big events of March, March 2021. Right. Okay. So we will start off with. And by the way, if anyone wants to know, that is my eldest son quite a few years ago in the photo. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with macro and oil. Actually, I'll just tell you. So we're going to talk about macro and oil. We're going to talk about vaccines, IPOs, M&As and SPACs, EVs, consumer and retail, offices and working from home, and finally a few very interesting separate stories. Okay, so anyway, we'll start off with the macro. In the US, Biden has Biden had managed to get his $1.9 trillion stimulus through. It became law. Actually, just over the weekend, he's also been talking about an additional $3 trillion infrastructure and support package. So that's another story. But anyway, he got that through. He's also done amazing stuff with vaccinations. He's pledged to vaccinate all adults by the end of May. And he also said that he wanted to double his vaccine goal to 200 million in the first 100 days of office. So it seems to be going pretty well over there at the moment. Also, another good thing as well in the US is that the latest figures out last week from the Department of Labor said that jobless claims were at their lowest level since the start of the pandemic. I mean, that is an amazing kind of milestone, I have to say, about the US. And obviously, US is everyone follows what is happening in the US, and it certainly seems that it is continuing to gain momentum. In China, there were some figures from China's National Bureau of Statistics, which show that industrial output was up 35.1% in the January to February period, which is above the market consensus of 30%. And that is, I think that's going to be probably unusually impressive this year, because there was no shutdown in that period. Because normally what happens is actually there's the world's largest migration of humans happens in China in that period, when you get lots of workers going back to their hometowns and villages and things over the Lunar New Year period. But this time round, and actually what happens then is they shut down the factories. Production stops, and that basically goes on. Anyway, this year that didn't really happen because there were lots of travel restrictions, etc. So actually, a lot of them just carried on working through. There weren't many shutdowns, so it will have looked particularly good, I would have thought, in terms of a yearly comparison. Anyway, moving on to Europe, the EU launched a legal action against the UK regarding our unilateral easing of trading conditions with Northern Ireland. I say that with a smile because, of course, the EU taking us to the Court of European Justice is, the European Court of Justice Clearly, we are going to get an extremely fair trial and completely unbiased, I'm sure. But anyway, we could face trade sanctions. Other than that, we've got, Germany, and I'm mentioning Germany separately because Germany is the engine of Europe. So again, it is something that is a country that everyone will be following to know the direction of Europe as a whole. So its government economic advisors were saying that growth is actually stalling because of the slow vaccine rollout. Now, as things stand, Germany needs to increase jab uptake by 50% versus current levels to reach the vaccination target of 70% of the adult population by September. So as a result of not going very well, Germany, economists have had to cut their GDP forecasts. And then coming close to home, or really at home for the UK. So this month, Rishi said it's really funny, by the way, just to say, it's quite funny when I talk about the month just gone, because it seems like ages ago this happened, but this is all this month anyway. So Rishi Sunak, he announced a spend now, tax later budget. Confidence is rising all over the shop. I mean, you've got manufacturing, services sector, consumers, all these tons of surveys coming out at the moment, and it really does feel like there is a groundswell of positivity, which is always nice to see in the UK. Anyway, you even saw house prices are going up according to Zoopla. I mean, Zoopla was saying it, Rightmove was saying it, so all this kind of thing is meaning that the consumer is feeling more confidence. So again, we are getting closer to the potential scenario, which is there's going to be a wall of money hitting the high street as soon as lockdown really starts to lift properly. Anyway, Bank of England left the interest rates unchanged at 0.1%, and there you go. But one of the other interesting things that happened this month was, you may hopefully remember the fact that a lot of UK businesses, they took out insurance for business interruption, and there was a lot of problems last year because the businesses felt that they were covered for business interruption for coronavirus, and then the insurers said, no, you're not. So anyway, on that front, I thought I'd hand over to Jake to give you a bit of an overview of that.
Cheers, Peter. So yeah, as Peter mentioned, there's been a huge amount of news coverage about insurance companies and the validity of the policies when it comes to pandemic-related disruption, not just in the business sense, but travel in so many different areas. And some of you might have been affected by that. Now, there have been countless disputes centered on whether policyholders are entitled to claim under their policies, and insurance companies have had to pay out huge sums to the policyholders who were covered. Now, perhaps unsurprisingly, Lloyd's of London and other industry analysts appear to be in agreement that the pandemic could become one of the costliest events ever for the insurance industry. Now, the areas of insurance that were most exposed to the impact of the pandemic include event cancellation, travel, life and private health insurance, business and supply chain interruption insurance, credit insurance, and more. I mean, there are so many types of insurances, it's really difficult to even keep track. Now, this all has a bunch of legal implications. For example, it's become very clear in light of the pandemic that many customers are unfamiliar with how insurance products work or what is specifically covered by their own policies. It's that classic, tick here, do you accept our terms and conditions? Yes, didn't really read them. And that attitude has caused some people to fall down. And this is part of the reason why there have been so many disputes, especially where the policy wording has turned out to be fairly ambiguous and just not covering a situation like this because it has been unprecedented. In addition, calculating customers' losses has been and will continue to be very difficult, as no one quite knows what their losses will be as the crisis continues to unfold. In this sense, it's difficult for the parties to understand what actually needs to be paid out under the relevant policies, even where the parties are in agreement that some kind of payout is due. Now, given everything that's happened, insurance companies will likely be reviewing and updating the wording of their policies to explicitly exclude pandemics and diseases like COVID, and to ensure the terms are clearer with less ambiguity in the future. Because if the terms are clearer, it's much harder to sue in relation to those terms. This could prevent, or hopefully prevent, a similar situation occurring in the future where customers just don't understand their rights and their entitlements. Now, in addition to updating their policies, insurance companies will need to develop strategies to manage the risk of reputational damage stemming from refusals to pay out. And they need to prepare to respond effectively to the influx of inquiries and claims that will likely continue over the coming months. Now, it's not necessarily all doom and gloom for the insurance industry, however. Some of the research I read from KPMG identified there might be some positive long-term financial impacts that the pandemic will have on the industry. Following the SARS pandemic, a while back, there was apparently a temporary increase in critical illness policy sales, for example, in Asia. And the current pandemic could cause more people to reconsider their individual health insurance needs. This could result in a greater rise in kind of global sales of health insurance and critical illness cover, and the insurance companies will be set to benefit in that sense. Back over to you, Peter. I love this newsroom feel.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
we definitely need some theme music. I'll try and work on that.
All right. So actually, funnily enough, just to a few points on that, actually. So I think there's going to be a few impacts from that. Is I would imagine more companies are going to get insured. That's one thing. So there's going to be more insurance premiums. So if there are more insurance premiums, maybe that means, would they come down? Yeah, maybe not. They won't be as high as they might have been, but I don't know. Obviously, we won't be able to tell. So I think more companies are going to get more insurance. And then the second thing, I can imagine the clause, the exclusion clause, is going to be a few pages long, isn't it? I mean, it will just list the number of, the specific illnesses and things that are excluded and all that kind of. Anyway, right. So thank you very much. So moving on, actually talking about coronavirus. So we're talking about vaccines now. There's absolutely loads of news on vaccines, unsurprisingly, this month. So first of all, the European rollout continues to be pretty useless. So you've got Slovakia, Czech Republic, Hungary, all making their own vaccine deals. You've got Austria and Denmark making their own side deal with Israel to form. To share and produce Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. You've got Russia in talks with Italy to produce the Sputnik 5 vaccine there. So really, things just continuing not to go well, in Europe. Now, Europe also has been stirring things up with outsiders by accusing the UK of banning exports of vaccines and vaccine ingredients, which they then backtracked on about the following day after doing that. But it seems, I don't know, it just seems to me that their tactic seems to be to say something really bad and then backtrack. And that's happened, I think, with the AstraZeneca vaccine, for instance. They come out, they slag it off, and then a couple of days later they go, oh, actually, no, it's okay. But, by then the damage is done. It sows the seed of doubt, and people suffer. Anyway, the other thing is, well, actually for Europe and everyone really, things got a whole lot worse as well, because the Serum Institute of India, which is the world's biggest manufacturer of vaccines, it was told to stop exports because of more cases in India. So it's like, priorities are got to help your own country. So that's what happened there. But yes, I think Jake, you were going to say something about vaccine controls, weren't you?
Yeah, it's that classic. When there are crisis and speed bumps and issues, that's where you tend to then have disputes. So, as Peter alluded to, vaccine programs across the world have hit a number of speed bumps over the last few months, largely because of shortages in some kind of supply. Countries, as a result, have been accusing one another of restricting exports, and that's led to ample debate over the legality of these actions from, I guess, an international law perspective and also a kind of contractual perspective. In legal terms, I mean, sanctity of contract is a key issue here. And by sanctity of contract, I mean the trust and reliance that individuals, businesses, and governments place on the notion that legally binding contracts will be upheld. People and organizations trade freely on the basis that contractual obligations will be upheld, or there will be consequences for the party in breach. And that's kind of the basis upon which trade and globalization operates. However, given the complexity of vaccine manufacturing, coupled with the incredibly tight timescales in which vaccines are expected to be produced and distributed, manufacturers have found themselves in a position where they're just unable to meet the output promised to every buyer within the deadlines agreed. And this means that some countries are missing out despite having contractual commitments to procure certain quantities of vaccines. And so countries are starting to intervene with threats around vaccine exports. And you've probably seen so many different news stories flying around with different senior figures from countries making all sorts of claims. And with all the backtracking, it makes it very hard to keep track of. The UK has been accused of taking priority over vaccines manufactured by AstraZeneca in the UK, with the result being that AstraZeneca has failed to meet its contractual commitments to the EU. The EU is threatening to ban exports to the UK of vaccines manufactured in the EU and promised to the UK, and so on. And this essentially means that countries are threatening to force vaccine manufacturers to breach contracts with other countries. And nobody really knows what to do. Nobody knows kind of who's in the right. And it all just seems like a little bit of bashing in the press at times and political pressure. Now, some of the debate centres, or at least the debate involving the UK and the EU, centres on the interpretation of emergency measures set out in treaties, such as Article 122 of the EU Treaty. Now, this article allows the EU bloc to take exceptional measures, such as seizing production of vaccines and suspending intellectual property rights, if severe difficulties arise in the supply of certain products to member states. However, the overarching argument is around the sort of morality and legality of states intervening with lawfully contracted supply, which has resulted in some questioning whether this is democratic or constitutional. Now, I am by no means an expert in constitutional law or any of that kind of stuff, so please take this with a pinch of salt, but this is just me presenting to you kind of what I've come across. Classic lawyer disclaimer there, but I'm gonna get it out. Now this has also led to some, for example, the WHO chief claiming that such vaccine nationalism could lead to a protracted recovery around the world, both in terms of health and the global economy. When it's all well and good thinking, oh great, my country's doing really well, I feel really safe, but countries around the world nowadays are so intertwined and interdependent on one another's kind of success and economies that people need to think globally in this kind of sense. All that said, it's an unprecedented situation, so it's not surprising that there is no clear precedent and therefore very little certainty as to kind of what's going on and what should happen. For these reasons, it's definitely worth tracking the story. And back to you in the studio, Peter.
And also, I realised I didn't put the right slides up. So if anyone's coming in and thinking, why have they got a money bag slide? So just for completeness, here is what you should have had. Anyway, right. Let's move on to the next. Let's move on to the next one. So IPOs and M&A. IPOs, M&A, and SPACs. Basically, alphabet spaghetti soup. So here we go. So IPOs in the US, we have Roblox and the South Korean e-tailer Coupang. They both had very strong market debuts. In London, Trustpilot actually floated, and also this week Deliveroo is expected to float, but the difficulty there is that all sorts of big investors like Legal & General, M&G, Aberdeen Standard Investments, and Aviva Investors, and various others, they have decided that they don't really want to take part in it. They say because they don't like the dual share structure that's going to happen. Which the dual share structure is that thing which enables founders to essentially have their cake and eat it, so they can sell shares, make loads of money, but also still keep the voting rights as well. So they don't like that. And then the other thing as well is because they say that they don't like the way that Deliveroo treats its workers. Now, I'd probably be a bit cynical there. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I personally think that the real reason behind it is that they think, well, the valuation's pretty toppy. They've priced themselves. It sort of works. They put a valuation on themselves about $10 billion. But, you know, the fact is, I really feel that at the moment we are at, or will soon be reaching, peak takeaway delivery, if indeed there is such a phrase. But, you know, peak takeaway delivery, we're going into, you know, lockdown is going to be lifting. People are going to be desperate to get out there on the streets and go to the actual restaurants for the sheer novelty at sitting at a table that's not their own. And I just think that all the delivery companies are going to have a difficult time unless they do something different to attract people to have takeaways. But anyway, I think we're at the peak of it. I personally think that they're not interested because it's a high valuation, and this is quite a nice sort of PR way of getting out of it and saying, oh no, we don't agree with that, and that's being very ethical about it. But it is, however, a very serious phenomenon, this, the whole gig economy thing, and how they treat these companies treat the people that happen to do stuff for them and get money for it. And I'm saying that because obviously you have to be careful about what you call such people, and which brings us on to Jake, who's going to tell us more about what's happened with Uber, because obviously that is very much a gig economy stock.
Absolutely. I mean, the case against Uber and other companies about the kind of the status of the people that work for them. I love that we're talking about this in such a roundabout way. It's been a huge story, especially over recent months, because as the gig economy grows, it can have huge implications. But I mean, I'll take a step back first. I mean, what is the gig economy? So according to one definition, the gig economy essentially refers to a labor market characterized by the prevalence of short-term contracts or freelance work rather than permanent employee or employment relationships. Now, in a gig economy, transactions between, for example, buyers and sellers, or providers of services and consumers of services, are often facilitated via intermediary technology platforms. So, for example, Deliveroo, Peter mentioned, facilitates transactions between restaurants and people who want to order food. Upwork facilitates transactions between freelance service providers and those needing services. And Uber facilitates transactions between drivers and individuals seeking transport. And there are loads of other examples I'm sure you can think of like that. Now, there has been a lot of legal, political, and commercial debate around the status of those people who provide the services through platforms like this. One of the first highly publicized cases involved a London firm called Pimlico Plumbers, which failed in its attempt to claim that one of its long-serving plumbers was an independent contractor rather than a worker. So why does that matter? Why does it matter if someone's an independent contractor or a worker? And the word worker also encompasses employees and certain other people who are not self-employed. And to give some comparison, I'm an independent contractor for most of my clients, whether it's copywriting, consulting, a lot of the other stuff I do. What this means is if I decide to have lunch or take 20 minutes off to recharge or whatever, I can't charge my clients for that time. Unless they agree, I guess. If I decide to take time off, I won't get paid. If I'm sick in the long term, I think my only recourse would probably be to sign on for benefits. My relationship is genuinely that of an independent contractor, however, as I have full control over whether I accept work, what prices I charge, dealing with any issues and complaints that arise and all that kind of stuff. Now, in contrast, workers, so people who are not independent contractors, they're entitled to benefits such as holiday pay, paid rest breaks, national minimum wage, and a number of legal protections relating to things like discrimination and pay deductions and whistleblowing. It can therefore be far more expensive and involve more potential liability for companies to use workers rather than independent contractors. So I hope you're with me so far, and that's kind of the context. That's why Uber is trying to say its drivers are not workers, they're independent contractors, and it's why Uber's drivers wanted to prove that they were in fact workers. Now, this case progressed through the Employment Tribunal and the Court of Appeal before finally reaching the Supreme Court more recently. And given how many thousands of drivers operate through Uber, you can hopefully see why the classification of its drivers was such an important decision from the company's perspective and also the driver's perspective. Now, Uber's key argument for its drivers being independent contractors, was centered upon the fact that there were separate contracts between a driver and a passenger, meaning the drivers didn't in practice work for Uber. Uber simply facilitated the transactions. However, the Supreme Court looked beyond the wording of Uber's contracts and focused on the substance of the relationship between the different stakeholders. And they thought focusing on the substance, that would give a true picture of the working relationship, whereas the working relationship might not be kind of fully and accurately represented by written agreement. The Supreme Court then based its decision, and its decision was that the relevant drivers were workers, not independent contractors. They based this on the following factors. So firstly, Uber sets the fees that customers pay and therefore controls how much drivers are paid. Now, when I'm working independently, I say this is my rate and a client will hopefully agree. They can't dictate what they pay me. They can just, I guess, decide not to pay me and not to hire me in the first place, though. Uber also sets the service fee that is deducted and controls whether fares are refunded following customer complaints. Whereas me as an independent contractor, if there's a complaint, we can work to resolve it, but my clients don't have full say over, what can and can't be deducted. In addition, the drivers have no scope to negotiate their contract with Uber, which demonstrates that Uber does, in reality, exercise a fair amount of control. On top of that, Uber controls drivers' choices about whether to accept passenger journey requests once logged into the app. So it does this by, and you might have noticed, hiding the intended destination until a request is accepted, and then penalising drivers who then decline the journey because they've now seen kind of what the route is. Uber also controls how drivers deliver their services. So they determine the pickup location, they set out a route for the journey. And although theoretically drivers don't need to follow that route, if they don't follow the route, they might get negative feedback, and that negative feedback can then result in Uber terminating the driver's access to the app. Finally, Uber restricts communication between the drivers and the passengers to make sure no direct relationship delivers there. For example, by handling all complaints and further interactions and that kind of thing. So the kind of theme that permeates through all of that is control. It's the level of control that Uber exert. Now, Uber has stressed in an online blog, and I must say this was published on the Uber website, so might be a little bit of bias in there, but Uber have stressed that the ruling doesn't apply to all drivers or all couriers who work for Uber Eats. It's just kind of those that actually brought the case. But with this now kind of being decided by the highest court in the UK, the status of other Uber drivers and couriers may well be called into question in the future. The case also sets a precedent for how tribunals may decide future cases regarding the employment status of those working as part of the gig economy, more broadly speaking. Now, where companies exercise a high degree of control over the individuals they engage, there's a likelihood those individuals will be classed as workers, regardless of what their contracts state. And this could have such an impact in terms of those companies' cost bases. Now, to cover these costs, businesses may need to increase their prices or choose to relinquish some kind of control. And the problem is, for a company like Uber or Deliveroo, if they relinquish a load of control, this can be very challenging commercially, given how difficult it can be to manage supply and demand if you're facilitating a marketplace. But it can also impact their ability to deliver consistent customer service, a consistent customer experience, and generally protect their brand and reputation. I mean, imagine with Uber, if every time you had a complaint, you were having to argue with each individual driver over that complaint. It might just not be commercially workable. So loads of stuff might stem from this, definitely worth tracking that. And it'll be interesting to see whether we see similar cases brought against other companies in the gig economy in the future.
Brilliant. And also I'd add to that as well that obviously European courts are now looking at it. So it's not the end. It's not the end there. So it's gonna rumble on that.
So
anyway,
yeah.
Anyway, moving on to M&A, so merger and acquisition. We saw alternative asset manager Apollo Global Management and life assurer Athene Holding got together to form a $29 billion financial conglomerate. That happened this month. GE sold its aircraft leasing business to AerCap, an Irish company, in a deal worth $30 billion. Microsoft is making moves to buy Discord, which is a messaging platform, for at least $10 billion apparently. And if that went ahead, that would be the biggest acquisition by Microsoft since it bought LinkedIn for $26.6 billion in 2016. Discord has 140 million monthly users. So, you know, quite expensive. Although you do kind of wonder what it would do under Microsoft, because it seems to me that Microsoft buys stuff and then it just doesn't do anything with it. I mean, I can't really see much that it's done much with LinkedIn, for instance. But anyway, at the smaller end of the scale, at a mere $2 billion, you got Bally, which is a US casino operator, making a takeover of GameSys, which owns Jackpot Joy and Virgin Games. This is really interesting because there's very much a a theme here of companies, US companies, British companies getting together. This is all to do with the legalization of sports betting in the US, which has happened relatively recently, and it's happening on a state-by-state basis. Given the fact that UK is an absolute nightmare for gambling at the moment, in terms of making money, and that it's under review as well at the moment, it's not surprising that you're getting lots of UK companies going to the US, etc. And also the US companies need the online gaming experience that the UK companies have. So it's quite interesting. There's a lot of it going on at the moment. The next thing I wanted to talk about, because basically there's loads of this about, is SPACs, which is the special purpose acquisition companies. But I think that Jake will be able to do a cracking job on that as well. So if you go over to you, Jake.
No pressure there. It's just funny. Peter and I were talking about starting this series a few months ago, and I just kind of mentioned in passing that I kept getting asked about SPACs in the chat. A couple of weeks later, Peter came back to me and said, "I'm getting the same thing. Everyone's asking me about SPACs." So covered it a little bit in our February wrap up, but I thought it'd be good to give a kind of brief back to basics overview of, or at least my understanding of what they are. But it's all very complicated before Peter gives that update. So as Peter mentioned, a SPAC, SPAC, it's a special purpose acquisition company with no existing operations, like a shell, and it's incorporated for the sole purpose of making one or more unspecified future acquisitions. Now, the founders of a SPAC are commonly referred to as sponsors, and they tend to have the necessary industry experience, contacts, relationships, market knowledge, and all that kind of stuff required to identify and complete transactions with attractive target businesses. So the identity of the sponsors and their experience is therefore key, and a number of high-profile sponsors have recently brought SPACs to market, which is clearly contributing towards the growth of their utilization. Now, once incorporated, so like once they set up as a company, a SPAC lists its shares on a public stock exchange, i.e. IPOs. The funds it raises by IPOing are then used to acquire one or more private companies, resulting in the acquired business effectively becoming publicly listed. Now, how does it raise money through an IPO if the business doesn't do anything? Well, that's where the identity of the sponsors come in. You have investors in the public market who trust the kind of decision-making skills of the people that have founded that SPAC. Therefore, they give it a bunch of money in advance and just hope that that money is kind of made a lot more valuable for them with the acquisitions made by the SPAC. So in that sense, from an investor perspective, SPACs are attractive because they allow investors to co-invest with expert sponsors that have access to potential acquisition targets that may not otherwise be available to investors through the public markets. Now, all of that being said, SPACs have attracted a bunch of criticism in the past for a number of reasons. Now, this is just high level. One of them is, as a SPAC will not have formally identified its acquisition targets at the time it floats on the stock exchange, investors are, to some extent at least, going in blind. On that note, according to an article I read from Norton Rose Fulbright, as SPACs are initially shell companies with no operations or trading history, disclosure via the IPO prospectus or the AIM admission document is fairly limited. Whereas with an IPO, disclosure could take months as they put all of this information about all the granular aspects of a company into a document so people know what they're investing in. Instead, with SPACs, disclosure consists primarily of the SPAC's acquisition strategy and its acquisition criteria, its capital structure, the biographies of its directors and officers and all the people involved, and the terms of any underwriting agreements. There is no historical financial information available because they haven't been trading like a normal company. And any of the risk factors presented are typically limited and generic in nature particularly where the acquisition strategy is more broadly defined. And that's because if you're not 100% sure which company you're going to be acquiring, how can you possibly pinpoint and assess the risks in any real detail? Now, substantive disclosure will need to be made once the target has been identified and the acquisition terms have been agreed. This will be long after the investors have parted with their money. As a final point, there have also been a bit of a debate around conflicts of interest, because people think conflicts of interest can arise where the sponsors have maybe existing interests in potential acquisition targets or kind of related companies, or where the interests of the sponsors, the directors, and the investors don't align. The solution for that, I haven't got a clue, but it's worth following all the analysis around all these huge SPACs that are happening. Hopefully that was helpful.
It's all good. It's all good. No, because I mean, the fact is, SPACs. Everyone's talking about SPACs at the moment. I think the prospects of more and more of them, it's going to increase. It's not that they're not going to die out anytime soon. Apart from, I would put one caveat in there. I reckon that if there are a few duff SPACs, on the trot, I would say that sentiment will could change very quickly, because a lot of things are taken on trust here. I mean, generally speaking, the subjects of these SPACs, usually companies that really, under normal circumstances, would not come to market for another few years, because they're not ready yet. They haven't got the track record. So, although there are, from a company point of view, I definitely think that, SPAC route is a very attractive route, because it means you can get the money in right now. You can take advantage of popularity in your particular industry. So, definitely from a company point of view, SPAC sounds great. From an investor point of view, I am not so sure myself, but then again, obviously, that depends on the nature of the SPAC. I mean, if you really, really want to invest in flying taxis and think that that's great, then by all means, chuck your money into that. But then there are other ones which may who knows, maybe do better, like Arrival. That obviously that happened. That floated on the New York Stock Exchange the other day. And actually it floated it had the biggest valuation ever for a British company floating on the New York Stock Exchange, which is pretty impressive considering it hasn't made very much at all yet, and it's going to do testing from this summer in the autumn in the UK. So I mean, there you go figure, as they say. But anyway, in terms of the sheer volume so far, according to Refinitiv data, SPACs did $109 billion worth of transactions globally in February, right? In February, just February. And the momentum is building because you've got lots of investors with money that needs a home. I mean, clearly that would be lovely if they could give some to Jake and myself. If they've got any spare billions lying around, but failing that, they'll put it into SPACs. Anyway, mind you, though, having said that, hedge funds have also been making money by shorting the likes of, say, Churchill Capital 4 and CIIG as well. So everyone's making money somehow from SPACs. Let's just hope that there's enough left over for the investors who put their money in there and their trust. Okay, so the next thing, I just remembered. The next thing, let's talk about electric vehicles. So again, really, there's tons and tons of stuff about electric vehicles this month. And just quick plug here in Watson's Monthly, we're restarting again this month. We're actually doing something about cars, about the automotive sector. Anyway, but with regard to electric vehicles, we've had all sorts of makers actually committing to or saying that they're going to commit to electric vehicles by certain timelines. So Volvo, Ford, Aston Martin, BMW, they were among the makers to announce their plans to electrify some or all of their lineup by 2025 or 2030, depending on which one it is. US car dealerships seem to be going ahead and converting their forecourts to be able to sell electric vehicles, which is not insignificant. They're having to put chargers in there and do all sorts of, jigging things around as well. So it's going to be difficult for them, because I think the volume at the moment of electric vehicle sales versus overall sales is, I think it's like either 2% or 5%. It's very, very low indeed. So clearly they're taking a leap of faith, and they're hoping that this time round, this is when it really is going to happen. Interestingly, on the electric vehicle front, Tesla were on a bit of a charm offensive last week, because in China, so Chinese authorities said that military staff and some employees of some state-controlled companies were forbidden from having Teslas because of security reasons, apparently. So obviously Musk has been saying, "Oh no, obviously we don't do anything like that." And I also wonder, is that a real thing, or is this part again of the whole US versus China tech whole malarkey that's going on? I say going on at the moment. It's been going on for the last few years, especially since the US did a massively, ultimately successful hatchet job of for Huawei, and basically scuppered their chances of doing much at all in 5G. Anyway, moving on. So car makers are continuing to try to drive down the cost of making electric vehicles. There was another sign that electric vehicles are edging towards the mainstream, as the Office for National Statistics that now uses prices of electric vehicles in their basket of prices that they use to calculate inflation. So what I mean by that is the Office for National Statistics, they choose a load of items which are supposed to reflect what we buy as a nation. It does change from time to time. This time round, they put electric. I don't know what came out, but electric vehicles went in, which I think is quite punchy, considering again, like, they are a minuscule percentage of overall car sales, but still they went in, and that's quite interesting. Again, that's just, I think, a sign of electric vehicles just getting closer towards the mainstream, albeit gradually. Then government, the other thing though, so they're giving with the one hand, this is very exciting on one hand, but on the other hand, the UK government cut electric vehicle subsidies unexpectedly. And funnily enough, the Society for Motor Manufacturers and Traders, the SMMT, which is the industry body, said that this would send the wrong signal, because other countries in Europe are increasing the subsidies or maintaining the subsidies, but really what that's all about, it's not about, oh, this sends the wrong signals. It's all about, we are going to suffer because our sales are going to fall, and that is what is going to happen, because time has shown time and again that when you take away the subsidies, the sales just drop off, sometimes ridiculously quickly. So anyway, we will see what is the true demand for electric vehicles now that this subsidy's gone down. Now, I'm often sort of mildly taking the mick out of the SMMT, but the thing is, they do have a point here, because in Germany, for instance, your average subsidy for a car, an electric vehicle, is about €9,000 and a bit. So, I mean, that makes I'd say that makes a proper difference. I would say that makes the difference between people deciding to buy now or to buy after their next petrol-powered car. Because so earlier on this year, we saw that Europe as a whole overtook China for the first time in terms of numbers of electric vehicles sold, and I think that is it's surely to goodness predominantly due to the fact that they've got a massive whacking great subsidy. So very interesting. Right, okay, so they also, because they're in complaint mode at the moment, understandably, because they're doing really badly, but the SMMT also said they put out this report that said in order for us to stay on track with the government's decision to make us all buy electric vehicles from 2030 onwards, they said that you need to install 700 this is a great, by the way, if you're going to a party soon and you want to impress other people at the party, you can, you have my permission to trot this fantastic fact out. You would need 700, so they need to put in 700 charging points per day, with the current rate is 42 per day. So it needs to increase rather significantly. And then also, again, I'm giving you this fact again for free. Apparently, one in three households has access to. So only 1 in 3 households have access to off-street parking. So again, people are going to be relying predominantly on public chargers. So there you go. This is my gift to you, to inject those exciting facts into exciting conversation. You're welcome in advance. Anyway, apart from that, you've got Motor Fuel Group, which is the biggest independent operator of petrol garages UK. By the way, isn't that a great name for a company? Motor Fuel Group. They must have had all sorts of focus groups trying to come up with that genius name. But anyway, so they have things like so BP, Shell, Merco, Jet, Texaco garages and so on. They're going to be spending £400 million on charges across the network to add 100 miles in under 10 minutes, which sounds lovely. A lot of money though, but obviously we'll see how that works. Then we move on to a few other bits to do with electric vehicles as well. So batteries. So VW said it was going to build, it's committing to build 6 new battery factories by 2030. By the way, everything seems to be happening by 2030. People seem to be going, everyone used to say party like it's 1999. I say that it's party like it's 2030 at the moment. Anyway, that's the new 1999. Anyway, Panasonic also said it would reduce its reliance on Tesla to make more batteries for other makers, but I think surely not. Surely that is Tesla saying to Panasonic, right, we're big now, we don't need you. We'll only work with you if you can provide us the stuff that we need for this price. And Panasonic probably went, oh, don't want that. Okay, we'll go off then. But anyway, they've obviously badged it as oh no, it's us walking away. But yeah, right. Anyway, so I think that's going to be quite good news though for the other manufacturers, because I'm sure that Panasonic has learned a hell of a lot working with Tesla since for about the last 10 years or so. Then we have the rather delicate problem that electric vehicle makers are experiencing at the moment, and that's a problem with chips. And I'm not talking about the potato deep fried kind. I'm talking about semiconductors. And the shortages look like they're going to be continuing till at least the second half. We've got NIO, Valeo, General Motors all complaining. And then that was made even worse by the fact that there was a fire, was it last week or something, at Renesas, which is a major Japanese chip making firm, which wiped out, I think, about 2/3 of its output in one go, and they specialize more in providing semiconductors for the automotive sector. So it doesn't just rain, it pours in the automotive sector at the moment. So there you go. There was something as well that was quite interesting that I was reading about batteries actually today, in fact, which was all about using a different type of battery that uses iron instead of nickel and cobalt, which a lot cheaper to produce. Loads more iron in the world than there is nickel and cobalt. But the problem is that and the other thing as well, they don't tend to overheat. But the problem is the range is a lot less, and also they have the propensity not to work very well in cold temperatures. So I'm thinking probably best not in the UK. Anyway, so that's what's going on at the moment. So moving on from that, just remembered again, Bosch shopping. Yes, I'm getting the hang of this. Right. Brilliant. So we consumer and retail. So as I always say to people, if you want to know how an economy is going to go, you need to understand the mindset of the consumer at any one time. But at the moment, it's looking good. Consumer confidence is rising. You've got residential property prices, as I said before. So they seem to be rising. So you've got Rightmove, Zoopla, all talking about asking prices rising, and demand as well. You've also seen unemployment fall unexpectedly for the latest quarter. And then there was a survey by Scottish Friendly and CBR, which reckons, this is again another fact. This is, I'll tell you what, you are going to be so popular at these parties that are coming up. It's unbelievable. Anyway, apparently, so we're going to be spending 26% of the £192 billion that people have spent. People have saved rather. Under lockdown, and apparently we're all going to be spending on holidays, travel and eating out, and I would also add alcohol onto the end of that. It's interesting though with travel, because there seem to be different thoughts on this. I mean, when we consider that the government has said, well, no foreign travel or no overseas travel, plus you've got obviously this third wave as well in Europe, it's quite interesting because Ryanair is increasing its flight schedule over the summer, but then you've got the Europe's biggest travel operator, TUI, reducing. So maybe the truth is somewhere in between there, but there are mixed views on that. Another good thing though is that cinemas are opening. So you've got AMC Entertainment, which is the biggest one in the world. It owns Odeon, for instance, and Cineworld. They're opening their cinemas. They're talking a very downbeat game. But I have to say, I really think that they're going to do exceptionally well. I mean, when people are allowed to go to these places, I think that whatever capacity they can have, they are going to fill it, because obviously, because there's going to be such an amazing schedule of incredible blockbusters, one after the other, coming out, and also people just thinking they actually would like to go and see better things on the big screen. I mean, I'm not massively a cinema person. I mean, I enjoy it, but the problem is obviously I've got young kids, and when people generally ask me, have you seen this film or that film, I say, listen, mate, if it's not if it's not got a song in it, or if it's or not animated, then I'm afraid you're asking the wrong guy. I am going to see, if I want to binge watch the Top Gun film, the Bond film, anything like that. I love all that stuff. So I don't think I'm alone in that. I mean, I think people are going to, this is going to be one of those, affordable luxuries, little treats that you'll do, and I think people are going to really go for it. And also apparently we're all going to be partying like it's 2030 in our gardens, because Asda pointed out that sales of barbecue and garden furniture have gone up by over 400%. Party time, everyone. So then moving on. So we've got groceries. So Amazon opened it again. It seems like ages ago, isn't it? But Amazon opened its first cashierless store in the UK. Morrison's dropped out of the FTSE 100. Ocado announced strong sales for the latest quarter, but said it was going to slow down, which I would agree with, because I think that again people are probably going to go more to the shops. I do think that the growth is also going to slow down, because I would argue, if you haven't got onto online grocery shopping by now, I'd say you're probably not going to. But anyway, so that's interesting. But then there are some companies still suffering. So Thornton's announced that it wouldn't reopen shops, and SSP was asking its shareholders for money. But the interesting there, so SSP is the one that owns things like Upper Crust, Cafe Ritazza, basically stuff that you tend to see at railway stations, right? So the interesting thing is, although they're asking for money to shore up their balance sheet and stuff, actually they are trying to get better locations where they are, because obviously there are far more vacancies around, and also the places are probably, I would imagine, offering lower rents. So, you know, that's what they're trying to do at the moment, which is good. I think that's good for the medium term. I don't think it's good for the short term, because short term, loads of people are still going to be working from home. But long, you know, medium term, I think that people will start drifting back to the office. Once they start doing that, going to the stations and stuff, little things will start picking up again, but not quite yet. I don't think that's yet. On the other hand, but on the shorter, in the short term, Greg's, they have had obviously a nightmare 2020, because they had to shut down. But they've said that actually they're going to be adding 100 new shops this year. You know, after having suffered their first annual loss for almost 40 years. So all of those fans out there of the vegan sausage roll, the steak bake, the cheese slice, whatever it is. By the way, I've never been there in my life. No, I'm just joking. I have been there on the odd occasion. Can't you tell? You know, I think it's going to be an absolute winner. People they're going to be nostalgic for it. They're going to be hot-footing it down there. The only thing I would say is that in a way for them, it might be a bit of a pity, because that lockdown is lifting as we are going into better weather, because I would have thought that they would do better, you know, your steak bakes and stuff like that in the winter. But, you know, I think that people will have enough nostalgia, etc., to want to actually support them. The other thing, though, is that they have pivoted to a reasonable extent under lockdown by doing, you know, longer hours, deliveries and things like that. I must say, I still can't get my head around getting a delivery of a sausage roll, but still. Anyway, that's what's going on. And then we're all, you know, and then anyway, so that's that on, you know, consumer and retail. So there. Okay, next thing is offices. Sorry, that wasn't a very good segue, was it? So I'll not refer to that as being a bad segue. We'll just move on.
Seamless.
Yeah, seamless. Anyway, so IWG, which is a big office provider, it managed to sign up its biggest ever client, NTT, which is Japan's big kind of telecoms company, giving access to all their offices for NTT employees around the world. And that's their biggest one. The chief exec of IWG, so IWG competes with WeWork and stuff like that, right? So he was saying, obviously the chief exec was talking a good game, saying, oh yes, no one's ever going to go back to 9 to 5, etc. It's all going to change, blah blah blah. But I kind of think, because he's talking his own book. I really do believe that not everyone is going to be working from home. I really think that people will be drifting in over time, and so is there really going to be a need for them? Plus the fact, of course, that you've got potentially loads of spare capacity coming online. So I think they're still going to be finding things very difficult. And then we've got working from home. There's loads. Deutsche Bank said that they would let their bankers work from home sort of 1 to 3 days a week. Nationwide have said, your employees can work nationwide. And so there's all of that. But then again, if you work for Goldman Sachs, maybe your time working in the office may not be quite so pleasant, according to the recent leak of the report that came out and was talking about what a hard time they're having. That sounds like I don't care. I do. I think that it is. There's no bones about it. If you're going to do investment banking for Goldman Sachs, I think you really know. You should know what you're signing yourself up for. So, but anyway, I ironically, just out of interest, I actually think this is going to be quite good for Goldman Sachs. It gives the people that believe even more belief in themselves, because they're thinking, yeah, I survived it, I can do this. And I said it will get rid of the people who I'll try and put it in a nice way, whose motivation is maybe less strong than other people. So I think it's interesting, and I think that Goldman's, in a way, although they would never admit it in a million years, probably think it's quite a good thing. So anyway, but with regard to working from home, I know, Jake, you certainly wanted to add something.
Yeah, I mean, lawyers are traditionally very office-bound people, and there's been big transformation in that kind of sense as the legal industry has transitioned almost fully to remote working. Now, seems to have worked pretty well for lawyers throughout 2020 and so far in 2021, but it does pose a number of challenges in the longer term. So to give an example, it might be far harder for firms to adopt firm-wide procedures to maintain client confidentiality, especially because a lot of lawyers tend to be working, living with friends or working with family members around. And there's also, I mean, fewer people think about this, but with this prevalence of smart devices in homes like Amazon Alexa and that kind of stuff, a lot of these devices record you whether or not you know, allegedly record you whether or not you know. And if these devices are recording and retaining potentially highly confidential conversations and conversations involving client information, that could cause all sorts of problems for firms if it ever got out. It might also be a lot harder for firms to impose robust cybersecurity measures, given the distributed nature of team members and their internet connections. I mean, saying that, a lot of city firms, or most city firms, seem to require their lawyers to continue accessing client documents via what they call a VPN, so a firm-specific virtual private network, which does tend to be pretty secure, but just something to think about. Another issue relates to kind of supervising and training new recruits. It's very challenging in a remote environment, especially given that there are now a large number of trainees, and I'm sure juniors at all sorts of professional services firms, who've never actually visited the offices or met their supervisors in person. And one unfortunate consequence of all of this is that juniors will lose direct access to more experienced colleagues, which can make it so much more difficult to learn on the job from others' experiences and kind of build rapport with senior colleagues. I mean, the more you can build a relationship with someone, the more confident and comfortable you feel asking questions, and asking those questions can be a really great way of learning. It will also be very likely that challenging for lawyers to collaborate in large teams and maintain a sort of positive, supportive firm culture, because everyone's distributed. There's only so much you can achieve via kind of Zoom and video conferencing. I mean, many of my friends who still work in the city, they really enjoy working from home, but most have said it can, at least to some extent, be more difficult to ask questions and work through complex problems and, I guess, coordinate busy, stressful signings and all that kind of stuff when you don't have everybody you need in the same room. I know Peter and I have spoken about this, and we've both said that we learned so much just from being in the same room as everyone else back in our city days, in the junior stages of our career, and just having people there at crunch times, and a lot of juniors are missing out on that. Now, whenever there is a sort of a negative, always look for the positive and the opportunity as well. So the shift to remote working does present a real opportunity for firms to cut costs by reducing their overheads, and that can increase their profitability. And some firms have already taken action in this regard. I mean, some firms are paying tens of millions of pounds a year just to rent out their offices, if not more, in one jurisdiction. According to the Financial Times, so not according to Jake Shogger, leading international law firms are now looking to reduce office space by as much as 50%. Some of the examples I read about included sort of Norton Rose Fulbright, DWF, and Phil Fisher. And some of these firms are kind of thinking about subletting space within their offices to other firms, whilst some law firms have just totally scrapped long-standing plans to move into shiny new offices. So this shows that firms are, at least to some extent, embracing a permanent shift to some level of remote working as they seek to downsize or sublet space. And I don't know anyone working in the city who's been given an indication that they'll be expected to go back to work full time. I mean, I think if some firms try that, they might lose out. They might have employees that leave because those employees have families and would rather, even if it means taking a pay cut, rather go and work somewhere where they can spend 2 or 3 days a week working from home. Just my thoughts. I love working from home. I get to do that all the time anyway, but I'm sure a lot of people feel that way for at least a few days a week.
Yeah, I think so. But one of the things though that I've been thinking about this is that if this option for working, so in the past, working from home was like seen as a perk. You'd have to work for a good few years before you even earned the right to say, oh, do you mind if I work from home? Whereas now, I think that seems to have potentially switched. I don't know how permanent it will be. I hope it is, because I think there are a lot of good things. I mean, I think there are a lot of good things working from home and working in the office. So I do think what might be good, what might be a great thing that happens from this, is it may equalize sort of opportunities for women in the workplace as well, because I think, and a lot of times, and I know my wife is like this, right? So is that you kind of get to the stage where you have the cost of childcare is so much in this country that it's almost you're working, one partner will be working just to pay for the childcare costs and won't be there and will be knackered and will be feel guilty, especially in a family sort of situation. So I sort of wonder whether if everyone gets the same right to work from home, that actually it won't be just women or young parents and stuff that have that. They won't feel so pressured to make really rather big decisions that tend to affect their careers for many years, if not permanently. So maybe some good will come out of this on that front. Anyway, getting a bit deep there. So let's keep the party going. Then just thought I'd finish off with a few extra little stories that I thought were quite interesting from this month. One is that Stripe has done incredibly well. Started by two brothers, 2010. In their latest funding round, it meant that it gave them an implied valuation of $95 billion. How amazing is that? Two brothers are just brilliant. And when you think that PayPal was the only game in town then, and now look at them. I mean, I think they've done phenomenally well. And another, again, free fact for you for those parties, of course, is that it is now worth more than Uber was and Facebook was when they went public and floated on, they did a public flotation. So pretty amazing. And I think they'll go from strength to strength. I mean, it's all about e-commerce that's growing. Stripe is that, I mean, it's well placed, I think. Anyway, next one, eToro. They have obviously, I thought I'd mention them because they're quite, they were part of this whole sort of, Reddit, Robinhood, thing going on at the beginning of this year. So I do think that it's interesting. So, I was saying earlier about SPACs, so they're thinking of doing an IPO via a SPAC. I think that this is an example of why a company would want to go via a SPAC, because they are literally taking advantage of the current wave of popularity for this kind of investing. I personally would be cautious about this because I think that there's the potential for huge regulatory risk here, because I think that there's a lot of criticism about the gamification of trading, and I think that eToro is when you get sort of little rewards and things going on your phone when you've done really well, and I do also think as well this is just sort of I kind of think is quite dodgy about these things is that it turns some of their top traders, you can follow them, right? So let's say you're trading, you think I don't know what to do, or I just can't be bothered, so I'll just follow someone who knows what they're doing, and then you go, okay, I'll follow the number one trader. Essentially, by doing that, you are making them an influencer, and and anything that they do potentially could have a hugely geared effect on what happens with the stock. And if you think that is difficult. Just think about, if you go a step further, you could be a top trader, and you could go, you could go to a company. I mean, if you were minded to, you could go to a company and go, well, look, everyone follows me. I know I'm not, I'm not Fidelity or anything, but everyone follows me. So do you want me to tell them a story and I'll buy your stock? We'll watch it go up and we'll make some money. I mean, I think that it's ripe for that. I think so. I really think that the regulators need to get hold of this. Anyway, so that's quite interesting. Also for Disney, it reached it reached, what was it, 100 million. Disney Plus reached 100 million subscribers this month, which is amazing considering it only did it, only launched last year, or end of the year before, whatever. And some analysts reckon that it will overtake Netflix within 3 years. Now, I personally don't believe that necessarily. I mean, I think that the last figures I saw, Netflix was at 200 million subscribers. One of the things, for what it's worth, I think that is interesting about the whole streaming thing is that everyone's mentioning these Netflix, Disney Plus, but I really think that the black horse in all this is, also the dark horse in this is Amazon, because Amazon Prime. So I reckon, what I personally think, what's going to happen is everyone's going to be realizing that, hold on a minute, I've got Disney Plus, I've got this, I've got that, and they're going to sort of go, well, I don't need all of them. So maybe what I'll do is I will do, Disney Plus for a month, Netflix for a month, HBO, whatever it is, and do like a rotation of them. But the one that I think that people are not going to cancel is Amazon Prime, because Amazon Prime uses, you've got all these other services and things as well. So for me, the number, with a Disney Plus or Netflix, getting a subscriber is another 10, 15 quid a month for them, right? But for Amazon, it's loads, because you get loads of people ordering all their, either maybe all their food shopping, but certainly all their, I don't know, electrical items and things like that. So I think that a Amazon Prime member for is extremely valuable to Amazon, whereas for Disney Plus and Netflix, not so much. Anyway, so the last thing I really I thought was definitely worth talking about this month was NFTs, and Jake is the world's foremost. Okay, sorry, but anyway, I just thought Jake would be really good to talk about NFTs, because they really have come into conversation a lot this month. So yeah, over to the London studio.
Cheers, Peter. Of all the topics Peter's sent me over to kind of look into and comment on, NFTs is definitely kind of one of the more complex and one of the more difficult ones to kind of get my head around, but super interesting. And before I started looking into this for this webinar, I'd just seen a couple of articles about the types of sums they've been sold for, and it was astounding. But back to basics. I mean, NFT stands for non-fungible token, which essentially means something that's unique and cannot be replaced. To give an example, a one-of-a-kind painting is non-fungible because there is only one of them. Now, the token part, the word token, tends to mean some kind of digital product or creation. So by NFTs, we essentially mean, as far as I know anyway, unique digital creations. Now, you think it's going to get simpler? Not necessarily. NFTs are distributed via blockchain technology, with most currently forming part of the Ethereum network, which also supports a very well-known cryptocurrency, Ethereum. Now, as NFTs are unique tokens on these networks, they can provide some level of authenticity for digital art. And this means they've become the ideal canvas for digital artists looking to create and monetize digital art. Now, NFTs can be anything digital: music, drawings, videos, all that kind of stuff. But much of the recent excitement has been around these kind of digital art forms, including things that look a bit like GIFs. Now, NFTs are designed to give buyers ownership of the relevant creation. Although, as is the case with some physical creations, such as works of art, the actual artists, the creators themselves, might still retain the copyright and reproduction rights. Now, the notion of there being an original digital creation and duplicates of that digital creation can be pretty difficult to get your head around, but that's apparently what people are paying for. On that note, some investors have actually gone a little nuts for NFTs. In March 2021, as a digital artist called BP, who I'd never heard of, and they did a collage called Every Day's The First 5,000 Days. And this collage sold for $69.3 million, just a digital collage. And I think it's something you can probably just see yourself by Googling it, but someone paid that kind of money just to be the original owner. Now, if I had sold that digital collage myself, I'd probably still be delivering this webinar, but it'd very much be from the Wi-Fi on my yacht. There was also a video of Banksy's work, which I think was called Morons, being burnt, and that sold for $380,000. And there are so many other stories out there like this. I'm assuming, as with the physical art market, this must all be in the hope that NFTs are going to appreciate with value over time and become a lot more popular. Now, in terms of legal implications, NFTs are pretty new, so the regulation of NFTs has not yet really developed. Now, countries need to decide how to classify NFTs, and the classification or ideas around it already kind of varies between jurisdictions. Some countries class them as security tokens. Not totally sure what the implications of that are, but this lack of clarity can create all sorts of ambiguity in terms of what rights does the owner or the holder of a token actually acquire. There might also be implications around money laundering. That's kind of tied to the unknown. There were similar allegations around Bitcoin, I think, near the beginning. But that means that those who are creating NFTs need to be careful that they comply with any applicable money laundering and financial regulations. In addition, there's been some criticism relating to the ambiguity around intellectual property rights, as I alluded to earlier. And from what I've read, owning an NFT doesn't automatically grant you ownership of an original work. From a copyright perspective, it's sort of more like a digital receipt indicating that you own a specific version of that work. Again, all very abstract. But this has led to certain buyers having perceptions of what they own that don't actually align with the legal reality, and then accusations of the companies involved in these transactions not being sufficiently transparent. So for this reason, there could be various opportunities for innovation in the intellectual property law space as IP lawyers try to get their heads around this and find solutions. But it is very much a watch this space, given how new it all is. That's about all I'm willing and comfortable commenting on. Take it with a massive pinch of salt. But even though I'd done this research and I knew what I was going to say, whilst Peter was speaking, I just had to Google that 69.3 million figure again just to make sure I hadn't got it wrong. And it seems like someone did actually pay that. So I'm sure you're all going to not believe me and Google it yourselves, but definitely check this out.
Certainly, I think the NFTs are. I've kind of held off on it, but it just seems to me the more I find out about NFTs, the more I think this is going to be one of the next big, this is going to be the next big thing, because suddenly, you've got a way of potentially putting value on certain types of assets, which were very difficult to do before. And as a result, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunities here to make money for a lot of, there's certainly the creators themselves, but definitely the lawyers, because where uncertainty reigns, lawyers make money. So I think that it's a very interesting area to look at the moment. So, but there you go. That's all I've and we've got, I think, in terms of this. So we'll just go to your slide, Jake, about Commercial Law Academy.
Brilliant, thanks so much. And actually, before I do that, I just wanted to say that Peter has probably coined one of the best phrases of all time in Duff Spack. That's been in my head since you first said it near the start of this video. So just remember, you heard it first. Newspapers. I almost wish I was still in the music industry, because that is a band name waiting to happen. Anyway, we're off topic there a little bit. So these webinars are put on by myself and Peter, and we're representing the Commercial Law Academy and Watson's Daily, and we want to let you know about it. We really hope you help us spread the word. Definitely check our platforms out, because it just goes kind of leaps and bounds beyond everything we can do in these webinars. The Commercial Law Academy, it's pretty new. It's a comprehensive e-learning platform for aspiring commercial lawyers. So there are hundreds of videos and articles, tips, quizzes, practice psychometric test questions, e-guides, all that kind of stuff from myself and industry experts. I also include the recordings of the webinars I've done with Peter, which has been brilliant, as does Peter, and we're constantly building up this bank of resources. In terms of what we cover, it's pretty much everything you need to know for the recruitment cycle. So boosting your CV, writing applications, psychometric tests, networking, assessment centers. I've got some real interview case studies in there where I talk through my own interview case study experiences, practical commercial awareness, current affairs, training contracts, growth mindset, all of that kind of stuff. So please check it out and let me know what you think. And the URL is there on the slide.
And then there's the next bit about the book. Should I put that onto there?
Yeah, why not? I'll give a quick overview.
Okay.
So to those of you that don't know, as well as the e-learning platform, I've published a bunch of books for different city careers. So we cover banking, consulting, and then a fair few books around commercial law. The newest of these, it took me 4 years to write. It's the Training Contract Handbook, which surprisingly for me anyway, I've never hit this milestone before, but was recently a #1 Amazon bestseller. So please check it out. Reviews have been really nice, but it covers a really detailed insight into what trainees do, summaries of all the key documents you come across and clauses and processes, and goes over the due diligence process and all that kind of stuff. And it's all the stuff that I wish I could have accessed when I was a student trying to learn more about the career. And also I would have loved to have had it on day one of a training contract just to help me to understand a lot of the jargon and stuff that was thrown my way. So I'm done plugging it all now, but please check out the books. Definitely check out the Academy. Check out Watson's Daily, which I'm sure Peter will tell you about now. And please, in the comments section of wherever we decide to post this video, give us some feedback. Let us know how we can improve this. Let us know what you really enjoyed so we can keep doing it. I think Peter's got such a great way of talking about this stuff, and I learn a lot through these sessions, and it would be great to know what you think too.
Thanks very much. Right, so we'll end the sharing there on the on the slides. So just to reiterate, we're doing this every month. We actually really enjoy this, and we want to bring you value basically. So yes, I hope that you do get some value from this. In terms of the Watson's Daily stuff, I mean, obviously I do this on a daily basis, hence Watson's Daily. But there's so much more content besides, and I'm always trying to think of new avenues and new ways of helping. I mean, one of the ways that is doing doing quite well at the moment is the Watson's Daily podcast. So it's commercial awareness with Watson's Daily, and I literally shocked to find quite recently that that the podcast has been top 10 of business news podcasts in Great Britain. So that's really great. I mean, all it is very simple. It's just me talking to one other person, and then we just pick out usually one story each from Watson's Daily. The whole idea of that is to try to give you an idea of what a commercial awareness conversation should sound like, kind of more of a natural way of hearing about it. So that's what we're doing. I mean, we've got lots of there are lots of other things coming out soon, but anyway, I'll stop talking there. But I hope you found value from this, and I'll leave it with Jake.
Cool. Thank you all for attending. We really hope you see us at the end of April. I'll stick some links around social so you can figure out where to sign up to that. And in the meantime, we hope you found it helpful. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks a lot. Bye.